Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you all how to set up a mob farm. And this mob farm isn't going to be an AFK mob farm. I just prefer this style of mob farm as opposed to the AFK ones when you have to wait for the enemies to spawn on screen and then walk to like the center where you have like a lava trap or something set up in order for you to get the loot. I prefer these styles instead where you just kill the enemies as they spawn. If you don't know what a mob farm is, it's essentially like a build-in or like a structure that you can make a big empty structure, and you'll have the mobs spawn in on like one area. So all the mobs will spawn on this like strip of platform that I have below, and they won't spawn anywhere else because these other areas, like all this empty space where the platform isn't, is filled with lava, and the mobs can't spawn on lava, so they'll only spawn here. And then what we'll do is just shoot them from above and then just drop down and get the loot at the bottom after we're done killing them. I'll quickly demonstrate it for you. So I have the blocks at the bottom actuated right now so mobs won't spawn, so let's just activate it. As you can see on the life form analyzer and the radar, enemies are spawning, and then whenever we're done we just deactivate them and go down and collect the loot. So we go down, we get the loot, and just rinse and repeat essentially. For this I'm gonna go step by step and show you how to start the mob farmer from scratch, and I'll show you as well some tips and tricks that I like to do with my mob farm just to make it a little bit more efficient while farming. So let's get right into it. Right. So the first step to setting up a mob farm would be to find a place underground that's in the cavern layers that you're gonna blow up in order to facilitate the farm. Normally I would do this right before I fight Wall of Flesh. So before I do any like elevators to quarantine the corruption in the world, I would make the mob farm and choose a spot that's in the caverns. And the reason you want to make sure that this is in the caverns is because you won't be able to get like souls of light and souls of night, and also certain enemies only spawns in the cavern layers, so you'd want to make sure that you have one set up in the caverns for that reason. So yeah, you would normally do it before you get into hard mode. This world, of course, is already in hard mode, but just for demonstration purposes, I'll set one up anyway in this world just to show you what to do. So the way that spawns work, enemies will spawn off screen. So with the current mob farm I'm at the moment, everything that you see here is on screen, excluding this platform at the bottom. And I'm not sure if I could see this part of the snow blocks that I have there. But the enemies will be spawning like in these areas off screen. So it's recommended that you at least have a rectangle that's about 168 blocks across and about 94 blocks tall. What I do 200 across and 100 tall, just to account for like any sorts of error. So that's what I like doing at least. But the minimum you'd have to do would be 168 across and 94 tall. So I'm gonna go ahead and find an area that I want to do it. I think I'll just do another grinder right above the one that I already have and just blow out the area with some TNT. And one more thing to note before we start setting up the farm, you'd want to ensure that it's not close to your NPCs, because NPCs do limit the spawn rate of enemies if they're too close. This one is definitely fine, and if we were to make another one it'll be far enough away, but you wouldn't want to create a farm like right here underneath where I have the caverns pylon set up, because then the NPCs up there will start to decrease the spawn rate a little bit. So just make sure that if you do set up the farm that you're far away from your NPCs, so that way they don't influence the spawn rate. Alright, so I found a place in the caverns just slightly above my other mob farm and a little bit below where I have my cavern pylon base set up. So when you find the spot, all you gotta do is just go ahead and get like a couple stacks of dynamite, sticky dynamite. So if you don't have any gel, you might wanna farm king slime a little bit. And then we're essentially gonna just start blowing up this place and carve out a giant cavernous area, which will then fill out to look like the mob farm that we have down here. Like I said, you want to do this before hard mode since the enemies aren't as hard to deal with. In hard mode at the beginning, like these kind of enemies and like the swords that go through the walls and the hollow mimics and stuff, they'd be a little bit harder to deal with. So definitely want to get the mob farm done before you get into hard mode. And when you do get into hard mode, there's a chance that the corruption will corrupt the area where you have to farm. So you might get some hollow or you might get some crimson where you have your farm set up. That's not really much of an issue. With that, you can either contaminate it when that does happen, or you can just ignore it. It doesn't really matter. So just one thing to add while I'm still setting up the farm, you may want to drink like a common potion, or maybe use the common torch. I forgot what it's called, but the torch that you make out of pink gel, just to decrease the enemy spawn rates a little bit. Because as you continue to blow the area up, it's gonna be big, and enemies are gonna start spawning a lot. So you're gonna have to deal with like bats and other enemies coming towards you, and you may not be in hard mode where you'll have an infinite flight mount. If you have the B mount, it could help you a little bit with like evasion and like accessing the roofs with the TNT. So that's just something to keep in mind when you do this. You're gonna have some enemies, so you might want to pop a common potion or two, and maybe have the gel torch, the pink gel torch, that will help with the enemies. Other than that, we're gonna go ahead and just finish up, and then I'll get back to you once we're ready. Okay, so far we've blown out a good chunk of the cavern so far. When I get to this point, what I like to do is start building the rectangle and then keep blowing up the blocks as I expand the rectangle. So since I generally build my my farms right off of my main elevator from my world, I like to start by replacing some of the oh god, a goblin army. I like to start by replacing some of the blocks for the rectangle with replacing the elevator that I blew up. So we're gonna go ahead and start and put down the 100 blocks and then start going across. And as blocks are in the way, we'll blow them up as we start expanding the rectangle across. Alright, so I placed down the 100 blocks that went downwards. So what we want to do now is start on the 200 blocks that we're going to need to go across for the rectangle. So what I like to do first is get 98 blocks and put down the 98 blocks first. And then once we run out of the 98 blocks, we'll be right in the middle of the grinder, and that's essentially where we're going to set up like the platform and the little base above the spawning platform for the enemies. So we want to be like as close to the middle as possible. So once we put down the 98 blocks, I'll put 2 blocks of something of a different material just to mark where the middle is, so that we'll remember after we're done creating the entire outline of it. So I'm going to go ahead and put down 98 blocks and then blow up whatever's in the way, and then I'll get back to you guys afterward. Alright, so I went ahead and I placed down the 98 blocks, and I'll just put down these 2 pumpkin blocks just so I know that this is 100 blocks, and right here in the middle is where I would want to build up my platform after the outline of the farm is done. You don't have to be as meticulous with it and be like this precise. I just like doing this just to know exactly where the middle is. But you don't have to be that precise with it. You can just gauge it. When the block is done, you can just gauge it and be like, oh, here's the middle, or here's the middle. As long as it's as close to the middle as possible, that's the most important part. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish off the rest of this and place the other 100 blocks. So that'll be 200 blocks completed across. And then I'll resume afterwards. Alright, so we're basically done with the rectangle now. It seems like I may have made the left side a tad shorter, about like 1 block, but that's fine. We make it 200 by 100 anyway, just to account for anything like that. So we can just go ahead and get rid of that extra block, and just put some platforms so that we're able to enter, well, to stop mobs that can't go through platforms from getting in there. And whenever we jump down from the elevator, we'll be able to get in. So now is going to be setting up the rest of the farm, which is in the center. So before we do that, there are a couple things we have to do first. Get rid of any water that's inside here. because we're gonna put lava on the floor to stop the mobs from spawning, because like I said earlier, the mobs don't spawn on lava. So any water that's still trapped inside, just go ahead and drain it. And then just go ahead and jump around the caverns and just make sure that there aren't blocks like these anywhere. You can probably see on the map if there are any. I may have gotten all of them, but just jump around on the map and make sure that there are no like single stranded blocks just straggled around, because they could make enemies spawn in places where you don't want them to spawn. So from what I see, everything looks okay. It doesn't seem like there are any blocks. What I'm gonna do is go and get about like, I want to say like 7 or 8 buckets of lava, because we're going to use the lava to stop the spawns, like I said. Okay, so now that all the water is gone, we can start putting the lava. But before we put the lava, there are a couple things we got to do first. So first thing, we're going to make like a small platform. This is going to be the spawn surface where the enemies spawn out of. We're going to make it elevated about 3 blocks off the ground. Well, I guess 4 blocks. Just make sure it's elevated. So we're gonna do that, and that way it allows us, if it's at least 3 blocks, it allows us to, well, 4 blocks, I mean, it allows us to walk underneath in case we ever have to get some loot that's underneath of the spawn platform. And for the spawn platform, you want to make it about, I'd say, maybe like anywhere from like 15 to 20 blocks wide. That way you ensure that a bunch of enemies can spawn up and they're not like stacked together, and the area isn't too wide that you're not able to hit the enemies. So you want to make sure it's about 15 blocks wide. So let's go ahead and do that. Or I'm gonna do like 16 blocks just to be on the safe side. So the enemies will spawn from here. So the next thing to do would be to drop the lava. So we're just gonna run and dump lava while we're running, just to cover up the bottom of the rectangle. And yeah, that's about good. The next step would be to make our, we're gonna measure out ropes, so about like 38 ropes or so. What we're doing here is that we need to be at least like, I think the minimum is about 37 blocks. We have to be about 37 blocks high from this platform so that it's off screen. And you want to be anywhere from like 37 to like 40 blocks or so maximum. So we're going to measure out 37 ropes and start building straight up. So let me actually drink some potions so that you guys can see. And yeah, about 37, I do 38 or so just to be on the safe side. And we're going to do it right in the middle. So with this, the platform is off screen now. And as you can see, enemies should be spawning soon. Not yet, but once we do that, we're gonna go ahead and just make a little base, a little square like the other farm that we have, similar to the other one. That's where we're gonna put like our safe and piggy bank and banners and stuff, and that'll protect us from enemy fire while we're spawning the enemies down there. So it doesn't have to be too big, but just big enough to hold a couple of buildings and like banners. You want it to be at least 3 wide so that we can be inside of here, as well as have access to banners and other stuff. Okay, so I went ahead and I finished making the our little safe zone, and as you can see, enemies are spawning. We're getting a lot of enemies now. One thing I want to do is improve the spawn surface a little bit. So what I like to do is just put some blocks at the side like this on both sides, and essentially just make it look like a football goal, American football goal. And what this does is that it funnels the enemies, it stops them from going overboard. You see how there's a bunch of loot like in the lava? When you do this, it'll at least keep the loot inside within the surface area. There's some enemies that can still get out, of course, like the flying enemies, they can get out, and enemies that fade through walls, they'll be able to get out. So you might have to collect some loot in the lava. But for the most part, you'll get most of your loot just inside this area. And this also funnels the flying enemies, so it'll make them have to like come a bit higher before they branch out and try and get you. The AI tries to get you, and by then you'll probably be able to kill them. So just make sure that you can see it on screen while you're inside of the safe zone. That way that you don't have enemies spawning on top of it. So cool, we can see it from here. So when the enemies do spawn, they'll be funneled through, and we'll be able to just have our loot better situated at the bottom. Okay, with that being done, the next thing we want to do is add some things that'll increase the spawn rate of the enemies. Of course, if you have a water candle, you want to use the water candle. That'll increase the spawn rates. And also, if you do have battle potions, you definitely want to use them while you're farming here. And the most important thing we want to do is add an artificial jungle biome that we're gonna create. Now, when you're in the jungle, being in the jungle increases enemy spawn rates as well. And all you need is at least 80 blocks of jungle, 80 jungle blocks. So either the lizard brick blocks or just blocks, mud blocks that have jungle grass seeds on them. You only need 80 of those in order for the spawns to be increased. What we're gonna do, we're gonna put a lot more than 80. We're gonna put essentially, from what we can see, we're gonna fill this area with mud blocks and put jungle grass seeds on them. Alright, so just to briefly illustrate, as you can see here, this little mud block platform is at the edge of the screen. What we're gonna do essentially is fill the rest of the screen that we can see here with mud blocks. So we'll make sure that in between each mud platform is at least 3 blocks so that we're able to run underneath it. And of course, we want everything to be on screen so that way enemies don't spawn on top of the jungle surface once it's done growing. If they do, if you have it off screen, they'll spawn and they'll just detract from the enemies that were spawning inside of our mob spawner. And if you're also doing this in pre-hard mode, chances are you're not going to have enough jungle seed to like completely cover all the mud blocks, which is why you'll have to wait for it to slowly spread. If you're in hard mode, what you can do is move the dryad to a mushroom biome. So I have the dryad up here. She's currently glitched with the steampunker. So when she's in a mushroom biome, she'll sell you mushroom grass seeds, and then you can go ahead and you can buy a bunch of mushroom grass seeds and plant them inside of the mud blocks, and then you can use the contaminator with green solution and that'll convert it to jungle grass. That's only if you're in hard mode and you've already defeated one of the mech bosses so that the steampunker spawns and you're able to purchase those from her. Otherwise, you'll have to just plant a jungle grass seed or a couple, how many you have. I checked on this, in this world I only have 3 jungle grass seeds, so you'll just have to plant whatever jungle grass seeds you have, and slowly the jungle grass will spread to the rest of the mud. Alright, so it should look something like this once you've placed down all of the mud blocks. When we stand in the middle, which is where we're going to be shooting the enemies from, we have everything on screen at once, so no enemies should be spawning as long as you're able to see everything on screen. At this point, you would have to wait. You would have already planted your mushroom grass seeds and just slowly wait for them to spread if you were in pre-hard mode. And by the time you get to hard mode, after you do your other prep for hard mode, you should have most of this already jungle. Of course, that would take too long for us, and we're already in hard mode. So what I'm gonna do is cut to me, just put in enough mushroom grass seeds and contaminate in the blocks so I can change the entire thing into jungle grass. Okay, so once you finish converting the mushroom blocks to jungle grass blocks, it should look something like this. And you'll notice that you get life fruits spawning, and you can also you'll get jungle enemies spawning like the jungle bats and the turtles if you go off screen. And also you can get Plantera bulbs spawning as well. So if you do want to fight Plantera in this area, you can set up an arena and do so. The only other thing we have to do is to actuate the platform below us, this right here. And the reason why is because when you go to collect the loot, you may want to not have enemies spawn since they could kill you, especially if it's early hard mode and you get hit by one of the Icar stickers or some random enemies down there that do a lot of damage to you. So you want to actuate the blocks before you collect the loot. And also the skeletal merchant, when he spawns, he drastically decreases the spawn rates of the mobs. So when he shows up and you notice it on the lifeform analyzer or the spawns just have dramatically decreased, most likely the skeletal merchant is there. So you would just flick the lever on the actuators and kill him, just to get him out the way, and then you can would continue farming the enemies. The actuator is set. As you can see, there might be some enemies at the bottom, so when we pull the switch, you can hear them taking damage. And you can go down there and all the loot will fall on the ground and no more enemies will spawn here. And then once you've collected your loot, you can go back up, pull the switch back, and now the enemies will start spawning again. So the mob farm is essentially done. The only other thing we have to do is set up blocks for biome changes so that you're able to fight different enemies from different biomes. And to do that, you just have to place enough blocks from that biome that you want to farm enemies from. So for the to make it hollow biome, you have to place at least 125 blocks. For corruption, I believe it's 200 blocks. Crimson is 300 blocks. And then if you want to farm enemies from like the underground desert or the snow biome, you'd need at least 1500 blocks for the desert and snow. One other thing to note is that even though this is technically the hollow biome, the enemies are dropping souls of light, you won't get too many hollow enemy spawns unless you change the spawn surface that the enemies are coming from. So let's just replace this with pearlstone block. That's where hollow enemies spawn from. And then also the block that you're standing on has to be of that biome as well. So some enemies won't spawn if you're not on pearlstone block or whatever block they're from, the biome they're from. For instance, I think you're not able to get mimics, the biome mimics, if you're not on the correct biome block. And some enemies don't spawn if you're behind background wall, if you're standing in front of background wall. So for instance, the chaos elementals, first off, you have to be technically moving for the chaos elementals to spawn. So for that, you can either grapple directly down or up and stay grappled while you shoot the enemies, or you can like continuously jump, and you have to make sure that you're not behind any background wall. So that's just one example. So for the most part, just make sure if you're farming an enemy from a biome, make sure you're standing on the biome block, and the spawn surface is also of the same block as well. Alright, so that's basically it with the mob farm. At this point, it's basically done. All you really gotta do, is just put down your buildings, like a save, or if you have a piggy bank, put it nearby so you can quickly store stuff, and like a bewitching table or the crystal ball or whatever you may have, and you can put up like campfires and stuff. So that's about all that's really noteworthy. The only thing I'll do is just go over a couple, like 2 more tricks that I like to do just to make farming here a little bit easier. So one thing I like to do is actuate the jungle blocks, and the reason being is because when you do that, if there's a life fruit, it just drops everything that's on top of the block, so you can just collect the life fruits easier. They'll be in the lava. And another reason is, well, the main reason is because when you go down to get the loot down here, you're gonna go off screen, so this is gonna be off screen. So sometimes when you come back, there's a bunch of enemies that are spawned here, or they may be like down here or whatever. And the jungle enemies hit a lot, especially if you're playing master mode like this is. So every time you go collect the loot, you might want to just actuate the blocks just to make it easier so that mobs don't spawn. Be wary though, because if a Plantera bulb is on the jungle grass platforms, then it will activate the platform. So another thing I like to do is set up a teleporter that takes me in and out of the mob spawner. Right now we're at my caverns pylon, and I usually like to put it next to the cavern so that if I ever like teleport here from one of the other pylons, I can just straight away go into the arena. Now this is my other mob spawner because I already have I already had it set up, and I didn't feel like setting up another one, so this is my other mob spawner. But yeah, another thing that's useful for, so if you do actuate the blocks, well, this one isn't actuated, but if you do happen to spawn Plantera, or if there's like a mimic, a hollowed mimic or something, and you don't want to fight them, you can quickly just leave the area like that, and that'll despawn them. So let me show you actually. Let's go ahead and spawn Plantera. Now you don't want to fight Plantera, you can just easily take the platform, and it'll be despawn. And the same thing goes with the hollowed mimics. And finally, you can go ahead and just convert the jungle over to a glowing mushroom biome. And with that, you can get glowing mushrooms if you need any, and also you can have truffle worms spawn. You can always just hammer like the middle of the blocks, and the truffle worms will fall inside of here, and you can just run up and catch them like that. The enemies will kill them, so you gotta be fast. There's gonna be a lot of enemies here if you're like popping a battle potion or something to increase the spawns for the truffle worms. But other than that, that would be about it for the video. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and comment what you thought about it. This is like my first real video I've made, so please just leave me some feedback. I'm kind of new to making videos, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.